This is we are live. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Jay and Margot show, where we keep it real, raw, and respectful. Tonight, we have our special guest, Shannon Rodriguez.
Hi.
Hi. She is a mother of two,
Yes.
one adult child
One
out
adult
of
child.
the home, but back in the home.
Yes, for right now.
Yeah, and then still one in school. How
Mhm.
old is Jackson?
Jackson's 9,
9.
so he's in third grade. So I have a third grader and a 22-year-old.
Okay. And tonight and she works in the school district.
Yep.
And you're a counselor.
Correct.
And you have your degree in counseling.
Yep.
And also in leadership and
Yep. I have I taught for a long time, so I have my degree in special ed, and then I have a master's in counseling, and then I have an ed leadership, which I don't do anything. I do have an ed specialist, but
right. And I just found out that you were with the special ed, and I said, "Man, that's great," because we are definitely going to be talking about that tonight.
Yeah.
First and foremost, let us see if anybody is live. Yep, we have somebody live. If you could just tell us real quick if you can hear both of us loud and clear, I'd greatly appreciate that. And if you tell us where you're from. But tonight, our topic is how to build healthy relationship with your children. And that's going to go with children in the home and children outside of the home. So let's get started.
Okay.
Now, when I first asked you to come on, one of my main questions to you was me being a single mom. First of all, if everybody don't remember that, I have 6 children of my own. I have 3 grown and out of the house, and then I have 3 at home still. I have one of them is 18. And let me tell you, man, when those kids hit that 18 age and they, are adults and everybody's in their ear about like all of a sudden they should have all the freedom in the world. I didn't want to get into the adult thing right away, but I did just jump right into that. But like I said, I have 18 at home still. And my whole goal now, and I know this sounds kind of bad, but my goal is just to get her graduated,
I understand.
And we're both in agreement on that. And they can hear us. Great. But we went through a phase where she was challenging my authority of, she's 18. She should be able to, set basically her own rules. And we were butting heads. I had one prior to that, that when she turned 18, same thing. Now, I had restrictions on her because she's the smallest out of all of my kids, even to this day. So hers were, for me, more safety issues, not letting her be out, till 2. I mean, still, she's only 18.
Right.
And that's the other thing. Like, how do we know when to let go, So I feel like I'm giving you a lot. But at one point with her, because we were butting heads so bad and I still had the 3 at home, I felt like it was causing a lot of discord in the house. And I actually had to ask her to leave. And that was very hurtful. I mean, it took me a lot of tears, a lot of, talking with my closest confidants, my mother at that, because they never did that to us. I've never known anybody to do that to their child. So I felt like I was doing a major disservice. But let's just kind of like get right into that then, when you have children at home who are butting heads. I know at 18, it's a little different once they're graduated. Because society says, okay, that's the age they should be leaving the nest.
Right.
But like I still had one at home and I was getting ready to do the same thing with her and she's not graduated yet. So what kind of advice, would you tell a parent like that, how to discipline, because they have to learn their own lessons. And I'm a believer, you're a believer,
Correct.
you're pastor's wife. And, in scripture, it says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and then they will never depart from it. But then we have real life. So what would you say, like, if I came to you in those moments,
Mhm.
what kind of advice do you give a parent who are going through hard times like that with their kid, where they don't want to destroy the relationship,
Mhm.
they don't know what else to do?
I think that's the biggest thing is just that building the relationship. All of our children are different. All of our kids have their own personalities. God's given them their own free will, and they like to challenge that free will, and they like to challenge how that goes. Um, but I think it's different. You brought up two different issues. So one, the 18 and not graduated, that's a little bit different than the 18 and graduated.
Yes.
18 and graduated, it's really hard for a student. I've had students before that get put out as soon as they're 18, and it's really hard for them to finish that degree and to get the diploma, which they need for the next step in life.
Yes.
So that's very difficult. They end up couch surfing. They end up doing, staying with friends, staying in cars, whatever. So that's a really difficult thing to do if they don't have a place to stay. Now, if it's a safety issue, that's different. But, you know, once they graduate, so if we can keep them until they've graduated, then we've at least given them the next piece of paper to do the next thing that they need in their life.
Yes.
18 and graduated gets to be a little bit more difficult.
Mhm.
But what would I say is I think I'd like to believe that the relationship is already built up and everybody kind of has the same goals. I think communication is key. I think even along the way, I'm probably one of those people, anyone that knows me knows that I talk a lot, probably more than I need to. I'm sure there are kids that are laughing at me, but I think it's important to find out where everybody's at and what the goal is. So
Yes.
if you're 18 and graduated, and so, okay, so you're staying with me for what? Like, what are we trying to do? What's the goal? Where are we trying
Mhm.
to be? I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. Okay, then we need to start having those conversations and start having those. Are we taking surveys? Is it a job that we're still struggling with? Do we need to go to school? Is it post-secondary? And just trying to find those connections, because if we don't know where we're going, we don't know how to get there. And so kids a lot of times, especially, just don't know where they're going. Society says that they should be figured out. They walk across the stage, you hand them a diploma, and they're supposed to have understood where they're going, and they don't. And that's one of the
No.
biggest
Yeah.
myths of society.
Yes.
Even when you start college, you don't have to know all the answers. You're not supposed to know it all. You're supposed to figure it out. And so I think as parents, we have to give them that room to figure that out and to make them as independent as possible. And that comes from those conversations. If we don't know where we're going, then we've got to figure that out. So, I think, that's our job as parents, is to make our kids independent, but we have to give them the space to do so. But sometimes that space is like, okay, you need a job, let's get a job. Let's work and get a job. Okay, we got a job now. What's next? What are we doing next? Because I don't think any child
Yes.
wants to live with their parents forever. I just think it's a safe space. And until they
Mhm.
feel confident to do the next step, they just kind of cling to what they know rather than try flying just a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
So
And you said something really great. You're saying about giving them room, so that they can start growing in their independence.
mhm.
At what age do you think we should start doing that? Because I saw recently on TV, this mom who was training their young children, and I want to say like toddlers under like 5 years old,
Mhm.
already cooking. And,
Mhm.
and a smaller makeshift like electric plate,
Mhm.
at their height,
Mhm.
with the knives. They can still cut,
Mhm.
but they don't look like the
Yeah.
nice knives.
Mhm.
So, what age do you think?
I think we do it earlier than we think, and maybe we don't put it in that frame of I'm teaching my child to be independent. But isn't that why we give them chores? Isn't that why part of that is you're part of the house, so you keep the house. But part of that too is to teach them what to do. Like even my son, like the other day, I said, Jackson, I need you to clean your room. He's like, why? Now, old school response would have been my response, my parents' response, other people's response would have been, well, because I told you to. But then I thought, well, that's a really valid question. Why do you have to clean your room? Well, it's easier if you clean your room every single day than doing one big, thing. If your friends come over, your room isn't dirty. This is kind of how you keep the house together. And so he really didn't understand why he did, and he did it once he was done. He's like, oh, okay, and he just did it. But it really was just that understanding. Why do we do it? So I think the
Wow.
more we can treat our children as young adults, but not like mini me's. That's not our job. They're not. We didn't create them to be mini me's, but we also want them to be independent. So if like my son's old enough to push the trash cans out. So why would I push him if he can push them? So it's just those things. So I think the younger you can do it, the better. And if they're ready for it and your children, then I say go for it. I mean, when my daughter was younger, she used to make this meal. She was like 4 or 5, and she would just put chicken in the oven bags,
Mhm.
and then she would make instant mashed potatoes and corn in the microwave. And so we'd have chicken and corn and
Wow,
but
that
she was
young?
like, because all she was doing was running the microwave and throwing it. So I
Wow.
think they can do it. They're ready for it. The kids
Right.
want to learn. I think a lot of times we think they're kids and they're children and they can't do it. So we don't give them those opportunities.
Right.
So I think the younger I would absolutely have my kid cutting if they were ready.
Wow. See, I don't even think I started my kids until they were about the 8, 9, 10
Mhm.
age frame. And that was just helping,
Right.
in the kitchen. And you just brought up something really good too. Again, like you were saying, oh Lord, Holy Spirit, bring it back to me. Man, I should have wrote down right when you said it because it goes for me that quick. Um, wow, it had to do with the independent. Oh, when he challenged you
Mhm.
with the question,
Mhm.
man, I am guilty of that. With my first 3,
Mhm.
There's a huge difference in my parenting style from my first
Mhm.
3 to my 3 younger ones.
Mhm.
And my first 3, it was that authoritative
Mhm.
discipline. Like you did not challenge your authority.
Right.
It's because I told you to.
Correct.
The minute that they challenged me, that was back talking. That's the way I was raised.
Mhm.
They got in trouble
Right.
at that moment,
Mhm.
So when they see me with my 3 younger ones,
Mhm.
they are like, "What are you doing?"
Mhm.
They are the way
We
they
could have
are
never had
because
that.
yes, and I would think at that point they're like, "You pretty much did not gave up on them,"
Right.
but just being tired, you become more lenient the older you get,
Mhm.
as the years goes on, and then like they say, you choose your battles.
Mhm.
But I would have to say I do. I did coddle them a little more
Mhm.
because I was not trying to be so authoritative and disciplining
Mhm.
all the time. But then now they challenge me a little too much,
Mhm.
and I've let it slide
Mhm.
to the point where it's like my 3 older ones come over, they'll go and look at their bedrooms and be like, "What?"
You never let us be like this.
Exactly.
Yep.
But now that the 3 at home, they are 16, 17, and 18.
Mhm.
And there's, I don't want to say a constant struggle, but there is a constant challenge
Mhm.
between us because I cannot just say, "Hey, go do this," without somebody saying something back.
Mhm.
Now, and it not necessarily always snotty,
Mhm.
but just,
Mhm.
saying something back. And then I'll be like, what? All right, as long as it's done before you go to bed,
Mhm.
or keep your door shut so I don't see your mess. But I have blurred those lines. Is there a way to reel it back in when they're that old now?
I think again, for me, everything comes with building relationships and having conversations. I think, and like I said, that's my job. I'm a school counselor. I was a teacher. I talked to kids my entire lifetime.
Mhm.
That's what I've done. So I probably do it more than other people. But I just think if you had those conversations and you have 16, 17, 18, so you have 3 people vying for all your attention all the
Oh,
time. So,
yes.
they're going to,
Yes.
those are 3 tough ages too.
Yes.
But I do think you can reel back. And I think it's just conversations like, hey, this is what we used to do. It got way it got way out of it. So what we need to do now is we all need to do this. We need to reel this back in. And I think, whether they like it or not, the conversation is there. And then if you need to, then the discipline follows that. Like we had the conversation, this is what we're going to do. You've chosen not to do it. So, then whatever comes up. But I
Mhm.
think you can regroup. We call it regrouping in my house. Like, listen, we need to regroup
That's
because we're
good.
not, we thought we were good and somebody's not understanding the assignment. So, we regroup, and not that my house is perfect by any means, but we just regroup it. And I think sometimes if you just have those conversations, because you are a family, and we're always, as parents, we're so hard on ourselves because we want to be perfect. We want to get it right because we're
Yes.
raising somebody that's going to be the next generation, and we're raising a human, and we've got to get it right. But no one taught us to be parents any more than somebody taught kids to be kids. And so sometimes I think we need to
Exactly.
give ourselves a little bit of grace that we're not going to get it right the first time, and we're not going to get it right the second or 15th or 20th time. And so we just have to give ourselves some grace at times and say, you know what? I thought this was going to work. This is not working. So we need to do something different. I mean, the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again, expecting different results. So why do we do the same thing parenting? So you just pivot.
Exactly.
We pivot and we try something different. And if it doesn't work, we try something different again. But I think the older our
Yes.
kids get, the more we can have conversations, even though sometimes the conversations seem challenging. Sometimes I really do think it comes from a wanting to know the information, like why does this need just this, why does it need to be done? And
Mhm.
so sometimes things just have to be done. Trash has to be taken out, clothes have to be, laundry has to be done, all the stuff that is awful to do, it has to be done because it has to get done. And the older they get, the more they can do that. Your 16, 17, 18-year-olds can decide, okay, listen, these are the chores that all need to be done. This is what needs to be done in the house. Who's doing what? Because everyone's doing something.
Right.
And so, maybe it's maybe you've always done laundry because you like the way it's done, but maybe your son does it and you hate the way he folds, but does it really matter? Because you're going to unfold it anyway. So
Exactly.
I just think, it's just a matter of regrouping sometimes.
Yes. Again, we have more people jumping on. We have Shannon Rodriguez here visiting with us today, our guest speaker, and we're talking about how to build healthy relationships between parent and child. We have to be mindful of the time tonight because she does have another commitment she has to get to, being a mom. We know how that goes.
Sorry.
So we will be having to cut this off at 7:30. So if you have any questions, definitely get them in the chat from now until then. And we do have a question. It says, how do you explain to your children that you don't have favorites, but they are treated differently according to their maturity level? Oh, this is good.
I thought that was it.
They're treated different according to their maturity level, past actions, or knowing what they are or aren't ready for. How do you explain that to them? Because, like I said, with my one daughter, I had rules around her based on her size, because I told her any person could literally just come behind you, pick you up, and walk off. And there's nothing you can do about it. She's that tiny. But she wasn't getting that in her head. And that caused major discord between us two. Like, don't you think I can take care of myself? I do, but not,
I do, but I really don't.
So yes, so their question right there is great. How do you explain that to them?
And I think that's just that, in our house too, the same thing was, it was kind of like you. Everything was about safety. That's why we had to do it. So, laundry wasn't about safety. That was just about will. But, when you go home, who you go with, where you go, who you stay with, where you spend the night, those were all safety concerns. The rule is now, if I can't touch you, I can't protect you. Like for Jackson, because he's little.
I like
with my daughter, it's the same thing. If you're not, at least if I can't see your location, or if I don't know where you're at, I can't protect you. I mean, she's definitely without arm's reach, but that doesn't mean that I still don't have a desire to protect her.
Now, is that even as her being an adult as well?
The
location, yeah.
Don't forget. So, for people that don't know, so my daughter was living in Detroit, so that was different because she was down there by herself, and so that was just a safety thing. Like I needed to know, because she was working at the hospitals, and she would like leave and walk like the streets of Detroit. So like I needed to know where she was.
Yes,
so,
yes.
And like if she goes out of town or whatever, I mean, if she's putzing around the mall, things like that, it's not a big deal. But she'll, we've kind of come to that agreement that she doesn't want it on all the time. But if she's out of town or somewhere new or out of reach or someplace she doesn't know somebody, then she puts it on. So again, we had that same battle of like,
yes,
this is what you do. This is a safety thing. So that's a maturity type thing. But then, my son is different because he's younger. So the conversations are, so you're right. The maturity level is difficult, but I think it's just a matter of, again, having those conversations, and they're not always going to like our answers. They don't like our answers. I don't think I like my mom's answers from 12 to 18. Like, right. I really don't think I liked most of what she said. And I was an only, so like there was nobody to practice on. I was it. So I'm sure it's probably why I was grounded from 12 to 16. But anyway, that's another day. So I think that's a good thing, is just having those conversations with your kids and just trying to make them understand why you're doing what you do. And like you said, I think it goes against what we have innately. Like most of us, our age, a little bit older, was that old school mentality. You just did it because you were told. And
yes.
And so I think it's hard now because kids have so much information at their fingertips. I mean, it's like the microwave society. Like we can't, I mean, we make the jokes that we can't even watch a full, like, oh my gosh, this TikTok's like a whole minute. Like, oh my gosh, like we don't even watch it.
Right.
So kids are starving for information. And so I think we have to change things differently. And that comes with having those conversations. And sometimes it kind of goes against who we are as people, wanting to have to explain things to our children because we feel this hierarchy of like, I'm the parent, you're the child.
Yes.
But sometimes I think it's just, they just have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. They don't have to agree with it. And I used to tell my kids, and I tell Jackson all the time, you don't have to agree with what I said. You don't even have to like what I said, but you will at least hear what I've said. And if you have something to say, you can say that. It's not necessarily going to change anything, but you've heard me, I will hear you. But I still get final say because I am the parent and that's my job, to raise you. But there's usually probably, and again, that may just be my house, but there's lots of conversations in my house trying to at least help them understand why. But yeah, that's definitely
Well,
a struggle.
and I know you only have two, and that's a boy and a girl.
Mhm.
So do they still try to say you're claiming favorites?
Yes. So my daughter will say that all the time. Like if I do something, because like similar to you, so like Jax will do something, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you would have never let me do that." I'm like, "Okay, first of all, that was 12 years ago. There's 12 years between you. I learned some things in 12 years.
Right.
I'd like to think I'm slightly smarter 12 years later. So sometimes it's what we learn. Like sometimes
Yes.
we do what
Very
we do.
true.
You do what you do with the information you have at the time. So with the
Mhm.
information I had at the time, this is what I thought, and the influences that I had and friends that I had was this is what you did.
Yes.
Well, then I thought, okay, well, that was kind of hard. So I don't want to do that again. Like, maybe if I do it this way, it'll be different. So sometimes it's just what we do. But yes, there will be back and forth. Like, how come Emma's allowed to do this? Well, because she's 22. Well, how come Jackson's allowed to? Because he's 9. Like, how come he gets to watch whatever he wants? Because he's 9 and you had 12 years of watching whatever you wanted to watch. And now, so there's still bickering, even though there's 12 and a half years between them.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it just looks around. It just goes back around to the other side. So. It's okay. But yeah, so it is a struggle. I just think it's hard. Parenting is hard. Being a kid is hard.
Yes.
I tell kids all the time, being a kid is hard. It's hard because you're trying to be independent. You're trying to be a human. The only way you know to do things is trial and error. And when you try, the only people you can try and have trial and error with is your parents. And sometimes that's a hard thing. And then you've got siblings who are trying to, so it's just like this big ping pong ball,
Yes. Yes.
of everybody trying to do what's right. And sometimes it goes perfect, and sometimes we just crash together, and we got to figure it out. But
So as we were talking about that, like every kid has a different personality.
Mhm.
Mine are all across the spectrum.
Mhm.
So when we have to have these discussions, how do you deal with a child who doesn't want to talk, won't open up?
So sometimes I know some parents are, like, let's have a family meeting, or so sometimes those work, and then sometimes it's not. Sometimes I've had other kids that write things down. So like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about, like at the family meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
Write your thoughts, because some people are better on paper, and some people are better at expressing themselves when they have time to think. Not everybody can work on the fly, and so sometimes it's a matter of giving them that space to say. So either you have the conversation and they get to respond later, or you let them know ahead of time, this is what we're talking about, and this is what you want to do, or whatever. But again, just knowing your kids and knowing, because then you're always going to have the one sibling that's going to talk over everybody, and so they've got to be reeled back in. You can there's when you do like restorative circles, you get like a talking stick. You can only talk when you have a talking stick, and so somebody else gets it. So there's different ways of doing things to make sure that everybody's heard, but it's a matter of knowing which way your kids function the best so that they can be heard. Because like I said, some people are verbal, and some people are written word, and some people they just need time to think. Some people need time to process, and so they can't always make quick decisions. So I think the more you know your kids and how they are as people, then we give them those spaces, to speak and to be heard the way that works best for them.
Yes. There is a book, talks about all the different personalities, the sanguine, melancholy. I can't think of it right now. Is it How to Win Friends and Influence People? That helped me out a lot. And then the 5 love languages as well, in order to be able to relate. If you've not read those books, I highly recommend those. Being a parent or even being married,
And in a relationship
yes,
with somebody else.
because the way that I related with my oldest child is not the same way I can relate to my youngest child, and the way that they feel loved are totally different. And like you said, that the 3 literally are battling for my time. One talks nonstop, and everybody's like, dude, can you stop so the rest of us can get some time, And so like from the minute I pick them up from the bus stop, the minute they get picked up to even we're walking in the door, everybody's still going, and I'm like, holy crap, you guys, it's only been 20 minutes and I need to decompress, But so with that being said, how do you make the children feel loved when there's multiple in the house with different personalities, where one really does need more time and they're grabbing for it physically, and verbally grabbing for it. And then you have the one that's just laid back and doesn't do that, but then is like, you're ignoring me. You don't love me, or doesn't feel like they're the favorite,
Right.
because they're not, What would you say to that
So
situation?
sometimes it's just again like if I look at my two children. So Jax is one of mine. Like okay, so I pick him up from school, and it's like everything, like what everybody brought to school, what everybody ate, what everybody wore, who was for
Yes.
the Eagles and who was for the Chiefs, and like I know everything.
Yep.
And Emma was kind of my laid back household. Fine, that's it. It's fine.
Yes.
Okay, but
Yep.
then I'd put her to bed, and after she'd had time to decompress, and after we would be laying there, we'd read a story, we'd say our prayers, and then she's like, "Oh, and then this happened at school, and then this, and then it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't planned on like a 45-minute like dissertation
At
of what happened
bedtime.
at bedtime. So then I knew with her, okay, if bedtime was 9, we bumped it back to start bed at like 8 o'clock because we had to have this 45-minute
That's good. Yes.
processing. And so sometimes, like you said, knowing their love languages is always a good thing. And it's kind of like knowing who they are as a learner, knowing who they are. The more that they know about themselves and can say that. So like I'll know like the tip in between my children, like Emma's love language, because she's read the book too. So like her love language is touch. And so I'll know that if I'm talking to Jax, if I could put my arm around her or whatever, I'm kind of getting
them both at
best
the
of
same
both worlds.
time.
Now it may not be all
Yes.
that she needs, but
Right.
it will be something.
Yes.
Or Jax needs to be heard, and so like he's kind of a quick 10, like he's in, you get like 10 minutes, and then he's ready to go. And Emma is much more detailed, but that's the difference between a dude and a girl. So like and being 9 and 22. So sometimes it's just knowing your kids and then knowing what they need and when they need it. But it is really hard too for kids, because if you think about, I think as adults we sometimes forget what kids have to do all day. So if you think about, like, if you take a high schooler, your high schoolers,
Yes.
my kids at school, they have 7 hours. So they get to school, they get up, they get up before they want to get up, they get to school, they're loud, 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 loud in the hallway, and then they have to be quiet for 50 minutes. And then they have 4 minutes to be quiet and 50 minutes, and 4 minutes to be quiet and 50 minutes, and 4 minutes to be quiet and 50 minutes. So they have to be quiet again. And then they have lunchtime. So it's like the break in the middle of the day, which all kids just go, crazy. And then they have to be quiet and they have to be quiet and they have to be quiet. And then they get on the bus or they get in the car. And so they have no time to really like, woo. And so when they see you, like when you pick them up at the bus stop, you're the safe space.
Right.
So when they get home, they're like, okay, I can finally process everything. And this made me mad, and this teacher made me mad, and and so you get it all at once, because all three are trying to process at the same time, because all three have had to hold on to it all day long.
Yes.
And so it's just that balance of, it's nice to be the safe space, but then you're still trying to process your day too. So it's just kind of those little things of like, okay, you listen to them, and then as soon as we get home, everyone's going to take 20 minutes.
Right. Go to your separate corners, your room.
Put your AirPods in,
whatever.
do what you got to do. And then we'll kind of come back. And then who emerges first is probably who needs you first. And so it's just tricks, but it's hard then when you throw in practices or, anything else that it comes up. It's just, there's always somebody wanting, but the part of that is because like I said, you're just the safe space. And so home is the safe space. That's why they act, sometimes they get crazy at home, because it's the safe space. It's a place to let your hair down and let it out and be able to process. And you want to do it with the people that you do it with.
Yeah. So. And we are actually getting to time. It's 7:27 already.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. And I wanted to ask you a question about the ADHD, but I feel like that's a whole conversation.
We can do a whole nother one on that.
Exactly. And we'll definitely have you back for that. Because, again, with trying to bring up our children and sometimes not even knowing if they have learning disabilities or that. So we're definitely going to make that a separate episode.
Okay.
And hopefully you'll be back. I want you back
did that
for
a very long
time. Yes. But to respect the time, if there's any last questions, we do have just 2 minutes left. Is there anything else, just based on what we were discussing, that you'd like to share that would be helpful to any parent out there that you've learned from your experience?
To just be easy on ourselves. Like you have to give yourself grace. God gives us grace. You have to give yourself grace, and find the people that will give you the grace if you can't give it to yourself. So find your person that will give the grace. It's somebody that you can tag into, you know what I mean? Like if you're struggling, you call me, I'm like, okay, I'll tag you out, and I'll go sit with you, or, we go do whatever it is that we do. But, we have to have a village to do it. And sometimes we just don't. And sometimes we don't want to admit when we're struggling, or when we're not getting it, or we're not, making it with our kids or whatever. We have to give ourselves the grace. The same thing that we have to give our kids. We just have to be mindful of the fact that, everyone's trying to figure it out, and they've got a big job to do by trying to go from being this baby to this human that can be independent on their own. And curious and they're scared and they're excited and they think they can take on the world because we've given them that ability to think that they can take on the world, and they can. We just have to help them do it. But in the meantime, we're still learning too, and every kid presents a different challenge, and we parent differently, and so we just have to.
And the situation they give you is different too.
And that same situation can present itself with the same kid 5 different times, and it's going to be different every time. So we just have to give ourselves a grace that we don't have to have all the answers right away. But if we love our kids and we do the best by them, at the end of the day, when you lay down your head, you think, I did the best that I could do with the information that I had. And I think at the end of the day, they're better than they were before, and I'm okay, and they're okay, and
well, amen.
We're okay.
Yes. Well, you heard it here. Even professionals say, give yourself grace. And no, not everybody has it figured out. And that is what for the Jay and Margo show, we encourage everybody that if they don't have that village, drop a comment or inbox us, because we are here for you. We don't ever want anybody to feel like they're doing this thing of life, parenting, just growing by themselves. But again, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to have this great space spot to end it at. Thank you, everybody online. And if you're watching this on a replay, and if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the comments and we'll get them answered for you. But until next Tuesday, we will be doing live, continuing the series. Next Tuesday is going to be building healthy relationships in business. So everybody have a good night.
Bye.